guys, this video is the first of many that I hope will be part of a series that I get to feature on my channel. Now, it's going to be slightly different from the normal reviews that I do because A, it's going to be about really any tools that I can get my hands on and use for a period of time. Don't know how long that's going to be yet. And I'm also going to go into a little more depth about the tool, like the pros and cons of it, modifications that you can do to maybe make it run or work a little bit better, how it works, alternatives within or outside of your budget depending on how much you're willing to spend. So I guess without further ado, let's just jump right into it. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Harbor Freight or Chicago Electric 90 amp flux cord wire welder. Now, I think the components, or the parts that you interact with that are critical to the operation of the unit, are a good place to start. And probably the best place to start with the components is what you see at face value, so the front panel on this unit. Now, you can see that there's really only 4 things that you need to pay attention to on the front of this unit, which are the wire feed speed knob, the power switch, the voltage or amperage selector switch, and the overheat light. Now, I'm going to freeze frame the video here real quick, just so I can point everything out in a little more detail. There's really nothing too special about the power switch. It lights up, it's a power switch, it's pretty generic. But the amperage or voltage selector switch leaves a lot to be desired for. Unlike other machines, it's not variable. You have minimum and you have maximum, and that's it. And you can't really tell what voltage or amperage minimum is and maximum is. All I know is that minimum is thin, maximum is thicker. However, the wire feed speed control is variable, and it's not tapped either, which means you go from 1 to 2 and there's no in between. 0 to 10, and you can set it anywhere in between 0 and 10, which is just fantastic. Moving up on this machine gains us access to the wire feed compartment, which, unlike other machines, is on top of the unit. Now, if you open it up, which does require two-handed operation of pushing in that little button and lifting up, you gain access to the place where you put the wire and the wire feed system. Now, the good thing about this unit is the fact that it can hold both 2 and 10-pound spools of wire without a third-party adapter, which means you don't have to go out and buy anything to hold a 10-pound spool of wire in this thing, which is awesome. However, you move down a little bit towards the wire feeder, and it's a little bit lackluster. It's made out of pretty cheap plastic, and it doesn't look like it should hold up, but it does. And this is a Harbor Freight unit, so you can't really expect them to put something fantastic in a $100 welder. Now, in that wire feeder are 2 drive rolls. One of them has no grooves in it. The other one has 2 grooves, and both of them are serrated. The 2 are for different sizes that this machine takes of wire, 30 thousandths and 35 thousandths, but they're serrated, which I wasn't honestly expecting in a $100 machine. I guess those drive rollers are becoming pretty common now, but they help feed the wire better just because it digs into it a little bit more. So if we look at the top of the lid, they have provided a nice little settings chart for us. Most MIG machines or wire feeder machines do this nowadays, and some of the settings are pretty accurate on some machines. Some companies do a good job of providing you with fairly decent starting points. Harbor Freight, however, does not. I'm going to freeze frame this image here so you can take a better look at this chart here. It gives horrible values based off of wire feed speed and thickness. Obviously, the minimum maximum thing is pretty easy to get down. As you get up to the thicker material, you turn to maximum, but their wire feed values are horrible. So I would recommend just ditching anything that they say on that chart and finding up your own values on a piece of scrap. Also, you can see the information on this thing as well, just a little bit of information about the unit. And there's one thing that stands out, or should stand out, and that's the fact that this thing outputs AC polarity. Now, to someone who might not know what flux cord welding is, that might not sound like a lot, but flux cord welding is supposed to be on DC electrode negative. That is, the wire is negative and the ground clamp is positive. This is not very good, and this produces a lot of problems that we'll talk about later in this video. Coming out of the machine are the peripherals, which consist of the ground clamp and the MIG gun. Now, I'm not going to talk about the power cable because there's nothing special about it. However, the ground clamp is a piece of garbage. There are jumper cable clamps that are better than this thing. It's not good. It doesn't conduct electricity very well. There's very few contact points on your table or your workpiece, and that could be a cause of some of the problems that I'll discuss in the pros and cons later in this video. However, the gun is pretty well made for the price. It feels good, it works. You know, I would like it to be made a little better, be a little more ergonomic, but this is a $100 unit, depending on if you get it on sale or not. So it's pretty decent for the price. Also, the gun takes Tweako/standard tips. I know Tweako kind of has some different MIG tips nowadays, but they're the ones that you can buy at basically any big box store, and the ones that most machines nowadays take. They're the ones that you just thread in, and it's really easy because you can buy them just about anywhere, online, in a big box store, you know, anywhere. You can get these tips just about anywhere, and they're fairly inexpensive as well. Now for some mods to make this unit run just a little bit better. The first thing you want to do is take off the stock ground clamp, which is really easy to do. You pull the little rubber handle off and undo a screw, and you want to replace it with an actual welding ground clamp with lots of copper on it. The second mod involves the nozzle. The stock nozzle is not needed as we're welding with flux core, and it, you know, makes the stick out way too long. So one thing you can do is just buy a flux cord nozzle, which is basically just something protective that you slip over the threads. That gives you really good visibility and also allows you to have proper stick out. But if you don't buy it online, they can be expensive. I bought mine at Home Depot, and it cost me almost $10. So if you're cheap and you have a bench grinder, you can take the stock nozzle and grind the end down, the end where the wire is going to be coming out of, to be about flush with the end of the tip. So that way you can get proper stick out and you have a lot better visibility. Now there is a more advanced mod for this machine if you're feeling a little adventurous. I haven't done it myself and I don't think I will, but I'm going to link this guy in the description, and there'll be a little annotation on the screen right now. Matt here converted this unit, which is AC to DC electrode negative, with the use of a bridge rectifier, some cable, and a capacitor. He made like a bunch of videos on it, so you can go, if you want to do that, go look at his videos. You know, they go in depth on how he did it. So how does this machine weld? Well, it outputs AC current, and we're welding with flux core, so it spatters more than frying something with too much grease. Now the spatter's pretty easy to deal with. You can take it off with a wire wheel fairly easily, but that's just something to be noted for. You have to deal with a ton of spatter. And it doesn't really have that much penetration as well, because it's AC, but also because it's lower powered. So, you know, that just kind of comes with it. If it was a bigger machine, it might have a little bit more penetration. It also stutters a bit. This could be a problem with the wire feed system having only one grooved roller, and this could also be due to the ground clamp, which has almost no contact on the material whatsoever. So it's either or. I'm going to end up replacing the ground clamp and seeing if that fixes the stuttering. It probably will, but, you know, who knows. It's better just to replace the ground clamp and give yourself more conductivity. Now for the pros and cons of this unit. I'll put a chart up on the screen and have everything listed as I list them. And we're going to start with the pros here. First off, it's cheap, which is a very, very good thing. It's also 110, 120 volt, which means it's very portable. It can essentially be plugged into any household outlet. It's flux core, which adds to its portability because it can be taken and used outside without having to worry about wind blowing your gas everywhere. Onto the cons of this thing, it's 110, 120 volt. Now, I just listed this as a pro, but it's also a con because it limits the amount of power that this thing can output. You can only weld up to a certain thickness of material because of the input voltage to this thing. It's flux core only, which I've also listed as a positive, but it's a negative because you're limited in the materials that you can weld. You're basically limited to just steel. You can't weld anything else. You can't add gas to weld, you know, any other types of steel. You can't add gas to weld stainless. You can't add gas to weld aluminum. You're stuck with just steel. It's AC output, which means it's not a desirable weld. The weld is ugly. it doesn't penetrate well, and it produces a ton of spatter, like I mentioned before. And another con is that the ground clamp is very, very crap. Before I get into the alternatives, I just wanted to say that I'm not sponsored by any of these companies whom I'm recommending welders from. None of them are paying me to say this. They've never sent me anything. I've never even used equipment from any of these companies. I'm just using these as alternatives because, well, they're inexpensive and their work, and they're all pretty decent quality. They're from pretty decent companies. So I just wanted to get that out of the way in case there was any confusion. You know, people can get in a lot of trouble for not saying if they're sponsored or not on this site. So I just wanted to clear that up. I'm not sponsored by any of these things. So as for recommendations, these aren't all of them. These are just ones that I've picked out from companies that make pretty decent products. None of that eBay special, no brand stuff. These are all pretty well-known brands. There will be some within budget, within $100 of the Harbor Freight Welder, and some within like $300 to $400 of the Harbor Freight Welder. So keep that in mind. But usually the more expensive ones will be able to do a little bit more than the Harbor Freight Welder. So I guess we'll just go within budget. And the only one that I could really find that wasn't super duper cheap within budget was the Forney Easy Weld Flux Core Welder, which currently goes for $152 American dollars and 43 cents. Now, if you're asking, why would I pay more for this when it does the exact same thing? It basically is the same machine as the Harbor Freight unit. This thing comes DC electrode negative stock. You don't have to modify it. So if you're not handy like that, you don't want to modify your machine, you really don't want to mess with the components of it, this is good because it's the proper polarity. Now for the alternatives that are a little bit more pricey. Now all of these alternatives are 120 volt MIG welders, which means you can use gas to weld steel with gas, stainless steel, and aluminum with them. So you can do a lot more, which is why they're alternatives and also why they're more expensive. And only one of them is inverter based. The other two are transformer based. So kind of weigh that in as some of your options. But the first one here, which is the inverter, is the 2017 Everlast iMig 140E, which is currently going for $429 US on Amazon. Now the second one is transformer based, so it has all the downsides of a transformer machine, is the HTP MIG 130 welder, which is currently going for $449 US on their site. Now, the final machine that I went with was the Hobart Handler 140 MIG welder, which on CyberWeld is going for $585. Now, if you look somewhere else, you could probably get this particular one cheaper, but I went with this one as opposed to their Easy Weld 130, just because this one is, again, a MIG welder, so you can do a lot more with it. Now for the final verdict of this machine. I think it is worth it for someone who's just getting started into welding, or the casual DIYer who's going to use it for things like tacking, small repairs on like garden tools, or ornamental work. It shouldn't be used by someone who's going to be doing more serious welding or welding on thicker material, and it should never, ever be used on structural work. Get a bigger welder and use more power. That's all I have to say for structural work. Anyways, that's all from me. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If it helped you out, also leave a like. And that's all from me, so I will see you guys in the next one.